Thanks, Rich. Hi, everyone. First session of the day. Hope we're going to have a good one. So, firstly, my name is Michael Sharman, Director of Product, working out of the Sydney office.
And I'm Pierre. I'm tech lead for the assessment stack, and I've been with Learnosity for 5 years.
Okay, so a quick outline for what we're going to talk about in the next 40 minutes or so. Firstly, we're going to go over some objectives or some goals that we tried to fill while we were developing and still develop the assessment APIs. Then we're going to go over a little bit of the fundamentals, the 101 that as developers you guys need to know when you're using our tools. Then we're going to go over some configuration options. It's sort of the first step in customizing using the out-of-the-box functionality. Then we're going to just look at styling. So CSS sounds nice and simple. There's actually a lot you can do with it. And then we'll go deeper into actually writing some custom JavaScript to see how you can use that to extend your own solutions. So firstly, I suppose it's important to know who we're developing for, and there are two main camps. The first one obviously are learners. They're the people who are sitting in front of a mobile or a tablet or a desktop, and they're doing a test. It could be an assessment, it could be a practice test, something like that. So K-12, obviously, that's a huge chunk of our end users, but also we target higher education and corporate and test prep, so it's not only just K-12 assessments. The other set of users really that we focus on is you guys. From day one, being an API, we knew that if it was simple for you guys to use and it was powerful, then you guys would use that. So we purposely designed them from the beginning to allow whoever's loading us in the host page to extend and build on top. So with that in mind, I suppose there's four key goals here that we've done. Firstly, powerful. We want to offer a lot of functionality out of the box. So a lot of things you can turn on and turn off. So flexible. You don't want every option on all the time. Nobody always wants the kitchen sink. So it needs to be flexible enough for you guys to control that. Of course, it needs to be extendable, as we mentioned. You might want extra things that we don't have. You might want to tweak what we have to fit into your platform, fit into your solution. But above all, it's really got to be simple. If it's not simple, then the first 3 points aren't really relevant. You're not going to use it. So hopefully we've met that goal and things are simple, and we'll talk through a little bit those today and hopefully show you how simple it is. As Gav or Mark mentioned earlier, so 46 million tests on average delivered per month. So doing pretty well.
Yeah, so before we start looking at how to customize our APIs, we'll just go through a few fundamentals and how to use them. First of all, the stack that we use is open web technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you have that on your page. You don't need to have any special magic sauce to use us. To use our APIs, first what you need to have is a HTML hook. So that's where the API will render on your page. That's what you can see here on the top. On the top right. And once you have that, you'll need to include the API in your page. So you load the script here, items.learnosity.com. That's our items API. Once you have that, you need to have the init options. That consists of a security package, which you generate in your server side. You don't want to have your secret and sensitive information on the client side. So you need to have that done before it hits the web page. And then you have the request. That's where you make references to the content you want to load, and that's where you include your configurations. When you have that, then you just call the init public method. That's one method we have for every single API we have, and then your API is up and running. If we look a bit more in detail about the last bit here, there are a few essential parts that we need to remember for the rest of the talk. So the first one is the app instance. So when you call init, it returns an object, which we call the app instance, and you will use that to call public methods and listen to events. So that's unique to the instance that you just called. Then we have the ready listener. This is a function that will be called when the API has finished loading. And then the third one is an error listener. You will use that to capture and handle any errors that can happen during the initialization, but also later on during the use of the API.
Okay, so there are two main usage scenarios that you can use. There are actually more, but we're just going to go over the two main ones today. What you're all probably doing, I hope, is using the items API directly and using our player. So if you look on the left-hand side there, you can actually see that although you're only initializing the items API, within that will load two other APIs, the assess API, which is our player, and then the lowest level piece, which is always there, which is the questions API. So it's worth knowing that, and the image on the right-hand side of that shows that the items API sits across. It actually doesn't have user interface. There's nothing to see there. But the assess API is the player. That's got the student controls, timers, and counters, and those sorts of things. And then whenever you see a question rendered in any of our APIs, that's always the questions API. So it's handy to know that, especially when you want to know in documentation where you're looking for events and public methods and things like that. So the second scenario you can do takes the player away. So we had items, assess, questions before. This one is just items and straight to questions. This one offers a huge amount of flexibility in that the red areas on the fictional little page here are just where we want an item rendered. You can sprinkle them around throughout anywhere. You might have an EPUB you've exploded onto just an HTML page. You might have some sort of instructional resource that you're going through. It's not a test. It's not an assessment scenario. So there's two main ways that are very flexible to use the items API. Okay, so now we've gone over the fundamentals. What can we do to start configuring these things? Let's have a look at a few examples of what you can do just to get you the flavor of what we're talking about. Now, on the left, we might be doing some student controls. Students might want to be able to pause. You might not want them to do that. Navigation areas and tools like calculators and protractors and things like that that you can enable for your students. Also, we have player controls, item counter, whether it's a timed test, and the layout of certain things. So in this example, we've just got a timer. Now, it's a 25-minute test, and you can see in the JSON down here, we just specify a time key, and then the max time and limits, and you can have warnings and all these sorts of things. Just really simple settings in the initialization object that we saw before. The second one, maybe you want to turn on things like the accessibility little modal that we've got, an answer eliminator, full screen controls. Again, just samples here of the out-of-the-box functionality you can turn on, turn off by just setting some flags in the initialization object. So up till about 2014, we had a more static approach, a fixed approach to our player. You could turn things on, turn things off, but you couldn't move them around. You couldn't position them where you wanted to. Thus was born a new approach we have called regions.
So what we did with regions is that we split the player in different areas. So here we can see that we have the items, so that's where all the items would be rendered with the slider behavior. And then we have a bunch of bottom regions and top ones. And on the right, we have a new vertical menu that you can use to place any of the elements that you can see around here. So for example, you can go with a vertical table of content here on the right, and on the bottom you can have your navigation. But if you want to have your navigation on the top left, you can also do that, and also order them within each region. So that gives you a lot more flexibility. But to still make it very easy for you to use regions, we came up with 3 out-of-the-box presets, which are based on the very commonly used configurations that we identified in our analytics. The first one is the main that you can see here. So you just pass a string, main region, and there you get navigation in the bottom right, a simple right menu with a bunch of functionalities here. You get the timer on the top right with a pause button, and the items here on the left will fill whatever height the item has. So if you have a very short one, it will end here, but if you have a very long one, you will never have a scroll bar or anything like that. Second one, which is a bit more suitable for a mobile experience, is called horizontal. So here the item takes more width. You have the flyout menu here on the right, so if you click on the arrow, you have a bit more description of what these buttons are. And on the bottom right, you have a horizontal pager. The item behaves the same. If you have a big item, it will push down the horizontal pager. And the third one that we have is called horizontal fixed. This one is very similar to the previous, but there's a change in behavior when it comes to resizing the player. So when you load the player with this region preset, it will take the full height of your page. And if you have a very long item, you will have a scroll bar here that shows up, which means that you can scroll down and you will not have the bottom region jumping on as you navigate. But what if you want to be more flexible? Well, that's the JSON structure that we offer to do that. So you can see a region subject with different keys that define what the regions are. Here on the right, you can see we have a save button, so each element has a type key, but you can also specify more options. So for example, if you want to display the calculator element, a calculator button with the scientific calculator feature that we have, you would use this key here. Or if you want to have a button, say the next button, but you don't want to have the text for next, you will use hide label option, and that will only show the little icon. So having that, it gives you ways to have a very minimalistic player if you want to. If you don't want to have any distraction, you might only want to have the next button in the bottom right region and nothing else. But you can also use all what we offer and have it all enabled. So let's have a look at a small demo of very simple use of regions. So here we have no right region. We have a top left region here, which has the previous and next button, so you can navigate between items. You can flag them also, so the student, if you can't answer the question, you can go back to it later. And then you have the review screen, which shows you the attempt status of each item and also if an item has been flagged. So if you use a region configuration like this, it will really take a lot of distraction away from the student. There is nothing special on the page.
Okay, so that's a lot about configuration. Just simple JSON, pretty standard. I'm sure you all get that. Moving on a little bit is styling our APIs. Now, let's have a look at what we're talking about. With CSS, you can apply different styles to the questions API, the lowest level API that's going to be rendering your questions. Or you can also apply it to the player itself. Okay? In terms of hosting them, we prefer that you guys do it themselves. It makes sense. You're loading the API, so it just makes sense that you control that CSS. But we can do that for you. One of the reasons why we might want to do that is if your authors need to see those styles, then if we host them, then it comes along with the consumer as any of the APIs load. So doing that way, then when they're authoring, they can see the same styles during assessment. So it just depends on your use case. So we have a little tool here. There's a link at the bottom you can grab later. If you do want to start look at how you might style some of the questions, all you have here is our main selectors for our question types. And as you hover over the selector, it'll highlight the certain region of the question that you might want to impact. That gives you your selector there, and then all you need to do is add your own at the front to have more specificity, so you can override. Okay, so we're going to look at a little bit of a demo here. This is one we put together a little while ago. You may have seen it. Now, this is just an intro item. It doesn't really look like Learnosity, but it's just CSS. Start button there. As we go into the test, we can see again, we have a regular question type, one of ours, but again, it doesn't look like that. So depending on what your needs are, you might want to make it appear more like something of an older Flash thing. You might want to have just specific needs for your platform, for your application. Okay, the states on correct answer, incorrect, and correct, again, they've just been styled a little bit differently. The pager at the bottom here is our out-of-the-box pager. Pierre was showing that before on the horizontal and horizontal fixed regions. So that's just native there. It's just loaded. All we've done is apply CSS. Let's have a quick look at what it might look like out of the box. Pierre's just going to jump to the tab. Now on this one, it's the same intro item. As we go into the test and start navigating through, you can see our player. We've got the pager bar at the bottom. It's very minimal. There's not many buttons on purpose for this specific example. But again, these are all the questions that have been authored as usual. Flicking back to the other tab though, you can see that all we've done is apply a style sheet to it, and it looks pretty different. Okay, that's just one example of what you can do with CSS. One extra thing, I suppose, is the little Einstein guy. If we click him, just another example of how you can show maybe distractor rationale or hints. That's the only bit of sort of JavaScript in this demo. Okay, so we've come through configuring. That's your first step. Some styling options there. Showed you something that's hopefully pretty drastic, pretty different. Let's look at what you might do to take that even further with extending.
So the first concept we want to introduce with extending is called public methods. So a public method is a way to programmatically control your assessment. So you can get and set data, you can show and hide some different elements, such as a custom dialog, or if you want to trigger the pause dialog to show, you can do that. And I mentioned it before, but we need to call all the public methods on the app instance. So you can see here on the right, we have items app, which is the instance of the Learnosity items.init that we called before. And then you can read stuff. So in the first example here on the right, we just want to get a list of all the attempted items. So you easily call that, and that's what you get, just a list with the item references. A cool one we have is custom dialogues. So say if for X or Y reasons you want to show something to the student, like a heads up or some help or whatever, you can call the dialogues.custom.show method, and you pass it an object with custom header, custom body. You can have as many buttons as you want, and then a student can interact with that. You can also pass HTML inside the body, so render some rich content. And then you can hide it using also a public method. So I think now we have 47 public methods in the player. We still add more, basically every sprint. It's going very well. We have a few cool ones. For example, here we have the audio player one. You can use, you can use it to play some audio and pause it. You can also add items as you go. So based on a given answer, you can choose to add an extra item with a higher or lower difficulty. But we also offer adaptive to do that. But if you want to use your own source, you can. You can flag items, you can navigate between, so go to a given index, previous, next. You can get the time. Yeah, so also a useful one is save and submit. So you can have your own buttons to do it. We'll speak about that later.
Okay, so let's look at another demo. We're going to combine a few of the things we've spoken so far. So one of them is just configuration. It's quite a minimal look and feel. Obviously CSS, so this is custom styling in here. There's only one piece that extends from the previous demo, and that's the two buttons you see on either side. So on the very left and the very right, those vertical buttons there. They're just examples of where you might want to have your own custom HTML on the page, and you can call out public methods on click of those. So again, configuration, styling, the pager at the bottom is the out-of-the-box pager, just styled with CSS. And then let's have a tiny bit of a look at some code snippets on how I might do the next and previous buttons. So you can see on the left there, they're just button elements, nothing fancy. It's just HTML. You put them and style them however you want on your page. We've just got an ID on them in this case, IDs, classes, whatever you want to use. And on the right-hand side, inside the ready listener, that's important. Everything you needs to be running in from inside the ready listener. We can just target the element, set up a click event as a listener, and then call assessapp.items.next or previous. So a pretty simple example on how you can combine all these things to really make the application do what you want it to do. There's another very important concept to know about extending your solution. It's called events. So events allows you to listen to what the player is doing. So for example, here on the right, if you want to know when an item is changed, you can easily use the on method. So if you look on the left here, the on method, you specify an event's name and then a callback. The callback is a function that will be called when this event happens. So back to this example here, what we want to do is every time the item change, we want to save the student's progress in the test. So what we'll do is we'll call the item apps save public methods. So that's very handy to do. So if for X or Y reason,
the laptop crashes or whatever, the students will always be able to resume on the right item with all these responses saved. But you can also use events on at the questions level. So instead of calling it on the items app instance, you will call it on the questions app. So that's a bit lower level. You need to specify which question you want to target. So that's the response ID here. And here in this case, we want to start an audio recording programmatically. So say when they back to Michael's example before, if they click one of the button in your page, you might want to start to record something. And then when the recording stops, you might want to play what the students have said. So in a few lines of code, you can easily do that. And we have tons of events at the question level. So for example, you can listen when a response has changed, do whatever you want.
Okay, another example of that, back to the custom dialog that Pierre was showing before. So he's just set up some code to on an event. Could be item changed. So maybe they listen to an item changed event and you want something to happen. Now, if you want to display a message to a student, you could roll your own. You could use a window.alert, maybe. You could use a bootstrap modal. You could have something of your own. But because we already have modals in here, we wanted to offer you guys access to our dialog. So the look and feel is exactly the same. As Pierre was talking about before, you can pass it in just HTML as the body. You can pass in buttons, and then you can add events to those buttons to do something once a student might click one. So a little bit of a question here, a little bit of a poll for the audience. How many question types does Learnosity offer? You have two options, 65 or more, 64 or less. The winner gets a prize. That was too easy. I told you we should have done something else. Yeah. All right, so you're right. So I'll see you later, because I don't know where they are. But just having a look a little bit deeper with the code sample on the left there, you can see that we've got the assess app instance there. We're just using the onPublic method to listen to an event. Now this is a custom event. So we have the out-of-the-box events that our player has, our questions API has. But in this instance, it's your event. It's your content in a custom modal, custom dialog. So the buttons are yours, but you can set up what happens when that button is clicked. That's what we do in the first line there. And in this case, we're just having a look on whether or not maybe they're on the last item or not. We're going to show and hide certain things. But that's just an example again. Custom dialog, custom buttons, and custom events to control what happens as a student interacts with it.
So I'll show you now a list of all the events that we offer in the player. So here on the left, you can see a list, and when I will start the test, you will see that they will start blinking as they happen. So I had the once method called when the test started, so it happens only once, so I didn't use on there. Then we can see the pulse here. It's every time the time changes, which you can see here on the right, we have a time change event. And then if I navigate between items, it's happening here. But yeah. So we have a bunch of events here, and then when I pause, I have the test pause, resume, test resume, etc. And then if I go and open the review screen, we should have this one show, and when I finish, it's pausing and submitting here. Yeah. So that's a very basic example of what you can use and all the parts that you can hook into to really make a very powerful usage of our APIs.
Okay, putting it all together. Let's have a look at another demo that you might have seen, you might not have seen. We're going to tell a bit of a story with this one. Everybody knows Little Red Riding Hood. So you may or may not have seen our version of this, Little Blue Riding Hood. Now, just before we, I guess, start the test, what we're showing here is, again, a little bit of just what you can do. Okay, one of the points we want to get across here is, yes, you can configure, and yes, you can style, and yes, you can extend, but here's what you might come up with. And for those who know, this was done, Pierre, in one day, roughly. It was a hack day.
2 people in one day.
Yep, two people, an HTML teenager, I think.
Yeah, he was 18 years old.
with help from our designer, and then one dev. Sat together in a room, and this is what they came up with. So, Little Blue Riding Hood. Once upon a time, little girl, but she had the Blue Riding Hood instead of the red one. Here we've just got, again, some pretty standard content, but using some animations coming in here. As we move through, though, you can start to see the questions as they come in. Doesn't look like a regular question here. But Blue Riding Hood, so she's home and her evil aunt has said, look, go visit your grandma. What's she going to take? What do you think? Swiss Army knife. Vicious. Okay, not allowed to do that. This is PG rated. What else can we take? A camera? That's probably safe, I think. Okay, so she leaves home and she's got a basket. Now, which road is she going to take? First of all, though, prize. What question type is this? This is a Learnosity question type. Best guess? True, false, multiple choice. Yeah. Multiple choice is what it is. Just do some CSS here to style it. So what do we want to do? Do we want to take the long road or the short road? The long road? All right, let's do that. Okay, so she arrives at Grandma's bungalow. It's a nice bungalow. Now, there's a trick though. There's a passcode, a little digicode she's got to enter. Question type? You might not know this one. Not the histogram, not hotspot. That was a good one though. Shading.
Yep.
Got to see you after. Okay, so we've got to put in the correct answer. Otherwise, we're not allowed to gain access. And as we move in, she sees Grandma, but Grandma's not really feeling well. So, question type. This is a tricky one. Looks like it, doesn't it? Isn't it? I'll give you this one. This is multiple choice. Again, just easy to author. Okay, you can deliver this, much like the one we looked at before, you can deliver this as a regular test or a regular set of questions, but it works so much better with this style. So as we go through, she's feeling a little bloated maybe, or she misplaced her teeth. Why are you so hairy? Well, I don't know. Justin Bieber is her idol, could be. Fancy to change. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not your grandma.
Yeah, I'm not your grandma. That could be right. Okay, so the wolf exposes himself. He's not really her grandma, and so Blue Riding Hood is sort of chased to another room. Now, what are we going to do? Pierre can choose one. He's going to jump on a bike.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
The city bikes. Okay, so the wolf runs, but now the hunter comes into the scene. So again, just using a little bit of animation, but really not gamifying it, but really encouraging the interaction. It's quite watchable. It's quite fun. Find the wolf. Can anyone see him? This is a tricky one if you're not sitting close.
Which question type is this?
Guess the question type. Finally,
Yeah.
put this one in for you. Okay, the wolf's behind the little tree there. So as we move along, unlucky, so yeah, Grandma met a grizzly Ann because we took the long way. But as I said, I mean, even though obviously the people in Aussie know our tools so they can do this, this was done in a day. One of the points we want to get across is it's really up to your imagination. What do you want to do with the tools? It's out of the box, has a lot of things. It's almost one of the problems because people see that and they go, oh, that's so great, I can use all these things, and they stop there. So one of the reasons we wanted to put all these demos in, even though they're available on the website, is to just reinforce what can you do with this. You can make the APIs do what you want them to do, look how you want them to look, and you can make them feel how you want them to feel.
But what if it's still not enough? What if you want to do more? Like question type that we don't have. This one here is just a basic slider, so it's easy to do, and you can do it with your own code. But if you want to integrate it in our APIs and get all the scoring power, then you can easily do it using something called a custom question type. This one here is done very easily using jQuery. It's like 100 lines of code max, a few lines of CSS, and you can easily do that with the scoring here, you can see, and also the score on the left. Another more advanced one is a box and whisker. We don't offer that out of the box, but a few hundred lines of code and using a library called D3, we can use that and have a very nice and interactive question type. So to use the custom questions, what you need to do first is to have the definition of this question and use the type custom here. And you will need to point to the JavaScript that the question needs to use. So we'll load that for you. Once you have that, you need to use our module definition, and you can load some of the libraries that our APIs has. So if you want to use a math question type, we have something called math core, and you will be able to use some mathematics operations on that. And then you just export it here. And we also provide the scoring interface that you need to use to get all the scoring done. So a few methods here: is valid, score, and then max score. So we did a few of these question types that you can find on our demo site, and we also have some partners doing some. Gav mentioned before Desmos. They did a great one with their powerful graphing app. So you can also check this out. It's really cool what they've done.
Okay, so just to wrap up before we open it up to some questions, if you guys have any, we just want to have a look a little bit on, I suppose, a customization continuum. So you can see the first thing you can do is just configure JSON options, nice and easy. Lots of clients do this. They do it a lot, and it really doesn't take long to do. You just got to read the docs and true and false things and try it out. Moving onwards, you can do some styling. Still pretty simple. Some customers are doing this. We'd like to see more. And hours to days, it just depends on how deep you want to go. And then, of course, extending, you can look at our events, our public methods. You can build in your own custom functionality, maybe using a dialogue or whatever it's going to be. Days to weeks, maybe. It just depends. And a few customers are doing this. We're seeing it more and more. So the message, I suppose, is we've really built this to be customized, to be extended, and we encourage you guys to be doing that. So you can customize it a little or a lot, just the areas that are important to you guys. It could just be styling, that's all you need. Maybe some of the behavior of our things you want, but you don't want the user interface, so you can roll your own. So you really are only limited by your imagination.